live. Yay!
Hi.
All right. Is it Jamia?
Jamia.
Jamia. Okay, good.
Yes.
Jamia, thank you so much for being my guest today. For those of you that are joining us on Facebook, this is the last in my series of 12 interviews with people from all over the world. Actually, I went international and talked about feminist parenting last week. So this is the last in my series of feminist interviews with people who you may or may not have heard of. So I specifically chose people who are in my world that I love and admire and are happy to connect with, but that not a lot of people know about. So Jamia, thank you so much for being here today. I was actually thinking while I was preparing for this interview, I was thinking about how we met, and I was thinking back, and it was my friend Alyssa Costa, who used to work with me when I worked at Planned Parenthood in Utah. So I was in Utah and she was in New York, and we were colleagues together. And she's like, "Do you know Jamia?" Because you totally know Jamia. And that's how the whole entire thing happened. So
I love it.
Happy. Yeah, I know. I love Alyssa is just such a fond. I just love her so much. So thank you.
She's wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And thank you for all the work that you do. Also, I love following your work.
I love following yours too.
Thank you.
So will you tell our audience a little bit more about who you are and just a bit about how you got to the place that you are right now?
Well, my name is Jamia Wilson. I am based in Manhattan, New York, and I'm originally from the South in South Carolina and North Carolina. I grew up in Saudi Arabia, which is another tale, but I consider myself sort of an expat kid and have had New York be my home base for a while. And I'm now the director and publisher of the Feminist Press at the City University of New York. So I'm a feminist publisher. I'm also an author and writer and speaker and a feminist activist. And I really cut my teeth in grassroots feminist organizing, working at Planned Parenthood, which we have in common. That's kind of a lifetime family. Once you've been working at Planned Parenthood, you're in it for life. And that led me to work in many different organizations focused on social justice work, reproductive justice work, civil liberties work, as well as work for free expression and specifically amplifying the voices of people of marginalized genders in the media at Women's Media Center, at TED, at Feminist Press, at Women Action in the Media. So I feel really lucky that I get to live my passion and work in my passion. And I write books for people for all ages and have a very specific joy and passion in my heart for children's books. And
I love your
do a lot of that.
So
Thank you.
And I just tagged everyone and said that we were live. So hopefully we'll get some people showing
Thank you.
But I love your children's book so much. The first book I ever wrote was a children's book, and I self-published it. And
tell us the title.
It's called Because We Chose to Love You, and we only printed 500 of them.
Beautiful.
And I wrote it for kids of all families, and the illustrations were all original pieces of art with a friend of mine who I was a co-therapist with way back when I worked at the Children's Center in Utah. And Christina just found the paintings. And she just found like 20 more copies of the book. And she was like, I think we should work together again. And I was like, yes. So
I love it.
I love your book so much. For those of you who have kiddos or even are a kiddo at heart, Jamia's children's books are top notch.
Thank you.
So I have a series of questions I'm going to ask you, and I have 3 surprise questions that you don't know about. So
sure. I'm excited.
These questions all came from the people who follow me and my work. So I'm really excited for these questions. So the first one is, what drives you to continue your work in the face of obstacles?
So, I
had a couple.
I've definitely had a couple. I definitely, have a PhD in obstacles, even though I don't have those diplomaed receipts. I would say that I have learned a lot through adversity in my life. And I think what motivates me in the face of obstacles is I really believe in purpose. I believe that we're all here to experience life, to learn from life. And while we're here in Earth School, as my friend Vanessa Cordnew calls it, there's so much that we can contribute and so much we can do to advance the world. And so I really take a lot of hope in the fact that while I'm here, I understand that there's always possibility, there's always opportunity, there's always vision for something that could be different. And that curiosity and that drive keeps me going, even during the hardest times, just really feeling an inherent sense of uh, purpose and a sense of birthright to know that in my limited time here, that I'm here for a reason, and I'm here to do things that will help make a better world for the next generation, but also for us who are here now. And I think I really got that from the example of my parents and family members who were involved in the civil rights movement, as well as my late mother, who was very much someone who carried the kind of integrity and dignity that I always aspire to reach. And just seeing through her example that she really did try to live a life of stewardship and service and goodwill to all is a value that I keep close. And that gets me through just knowing that value is out there, and that if you hold it, it always continues to grow. It always continues to spread. It always continues to foster good things.
I love that so much, because a lot of times in my work, I talk about our divine purpose and how and our divine assignment, and how we are here, we are placed here by the divine to do our own unique work, and we're not supposed to do it like anybody else. Like, we get trained by the patriarchy, we're supposed to do it like everybody else, but really each one of us here is here to fill out this assignment. And I love that that's the thing that helps push you through to continue in the face of obstacles. I think that's just beautiful.
I love that that's your teaching, because with the assignment, when I started to really kind of get into this understanding that I had this view and understanding of life, I started to see certain patterns repeat themselves of lessons that I had not quite learned yet, that kept manifesting themselves and coming again and again, and kind of saying right to the divine, okay, I see that you still see that I've not learned this lesson to completion yet. And I want to let you know that perhaps I have seen this lesson and I will continue to work on it if you want to give me some softer, smoother lessons to move through now. And so that has been a part of the humor that I also think is really important to carry with it, that as I've been regarding the assignments, like you said, in my life and the repeat lessons, I get to kind of say, okay, I understand. And when my mom was in the last weeks of her life, and like a very just thoughtful, smart, wise, visionary person, one day she pulled me aside and said, "You're learning. I can tell you're learning, and I want you to know." And that is something I hold very much dear, because I thought, okay, the fact that she believes that I'm learning, that is the actual point. That is the point. And that is something I think about a lot when I do find myself falling short of my own expectations, or hypervigilance, even things that aren't necessarily the best things to be dealing with, and thinking, oh, but I'm learning. I love that
right? So much. And I love that that was the message that your mom gave you right before, because I think we always are. And it's the struggle happens when we resist that. I have, before the pandemic happened and before we ended up, being quarantined, I kept asking God for obvious signs that I was on the right path. And I was like, please don't be subtle. Like, I need a bitch slap. I want to chew my floor. Like, don't be subtle. And every day I would just get thwacked in the face. And I was like, perhaps I should have asked for subtle. Like, what was I thinking? But this idea that we're constantly like questioning if we're on the right path. And I think that's the, I talk a lot about unfucking the patriarchy in your brain, because that's really the thing that is just holds us all back. And so I love that idea that you just got that obvious message that you're learning from that you get to cherish from your mom. It's so wonderful. So the next question I have for you leads perfectly from that. Is how do you fight imposter syndrome and feeling inadequate about your skills, education, and ideas?
I think this concept of imposter syndrome is an ongoing battle, because like you said, we're in patriarchy, in a society where we're constantly receiving messages from the media, the external culture, white supremacy, of patriarchy, all of these messages that make us feel as if we don't belong, that our ideas are not as valuable as people who are in the dominant positions of power. It's a constant battle to unlearn all of that which you've absorbed. Even if you have a consciousness about all these systems at play, we are a product of the conditioning of our environment. And so for me, I'm constantly having to have a process and a practice of acknowledging and addressing and self-forgiveness about how I am handling.
Hey, hold that thought.
Oh, that's okay.
Stop, Dakota. Dakota, leave it. No one's there. Potato, come here. It's okay. No one's there. Live and in person. Dakota.
He has a lot to say about patriarchy. A poodle.
She's having enough. She's like, I'm done.
Oh my gosh, I love this poodle.
No one's here. Thank you, Caitlin. Anyway, as you were saying, imposter syndrome and the patriarchy.
So imposter syndrome, and I love that because this poodle actually clearly has a lot to say in the subject, is that the patriarchy will, sort of delude us and gaslight us into believing in its truth versus our own.
Ooh, I love that.
And that happens all the time, or that getting noisy so that you can't hear your own inner whispers or screams, right, of what you know to be the truth, making you question your own reality, making you question your own outrage and your own instincts about what is wrong and what is right, and what is wrong and what is right for you, and how you should relate to others. So for me, it's always about returning to what is true to myself, returning to practices and bodily experiences and writing and ways of self-expression that go against what the conditioning tells me are the limitations of my life and possibility. And so that is extremely important. I believe that it's the first step is acknowledging it and not wallowing in the shame of it, but acknowledging it and being able to say with vulnerability, yes, I have lived and absorbed and been conditioned into all of this because of all of these things that are imposing it from beyond myself externally. Sometimes I could be fostering the exact things I'm trying to dismantle in society. Sometimes I could be guilty of perpetuating the exact systems that are destructive to myself and destructive to my community.
Can you give us an example of that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one example I give often when I talk to young people who ask me questions about that is that when I was in college, I was taking all these women's studies classes and sociology classes and social justice classes and having my thoughts about my own dialectic and what I was thinking about the world and how we were going to dismantle these systems. And yet every Halloween costume that I wore for the majority of my college years was based on some very problematic patriarchal ideals of what it meant to be a woman, to be a Black woman, and also just what it meant to be objectified or fetishized. And so I think about that a lot because even something that seems so benign as a Halloween costume is something when I go and look back at some of my non-proudest moments, I think, why is it that although I was taking all these courses and writing papers about patriarchy and writing papers about wanting redistribution of wealth so that all people could have it, that I was perpetuating these consumeristic costumes and perpetuating the sexualization of young women in media and all of those things that I now feel a sense of shame and disappointment about, but no, it was a part of the learning journey. And I think what I like to share about it is that that is true for most of us. Beyonce, when she first did that self-titled album, when she dropped that album and called herself a feminist, what I think made so many people embrace it is that she was embracing the complication of her feminism. And she was saying that she wasn't perfect. She didn't have it all figured out, but she did have this inherent sense of wanting equality and wanting justice and wanting to be the CEO of her own life, kind of as she was talking about it as well. And wanting to be able to express her body and her words on her own terms. And to run her business on her own terms. And I think it's just something I've thought a lot about, that the Halloween costumes are a way that I think I didn't even really have much of an idea that I was really kind of perpetuating certain ideas. I mean, I'm even thinking about ideas as it relates to body activism and different things around that as it related to those costumes. There's just so much about it. Cultural appropriation, all of those things that I'm not proud of, but I can draw back to saying that even though I had gotten access to the wisdom, read the right books, it wasn't necessarily always showing up in my actions. And I think most of us could draw many of those experiences. And then another just tangible example would be that we find ourselves sometimes slipping back into the roles that others assign to us, especially during times of grief or crisis. As you know, in your work, I'm sure you hear a lot of people talking about that. And I was thinking about being in family settings sometimes and automatically feeling like, oh, I am going to go and start fixing everyone's plate or washing these dishes while cis men in the family are watching the game. And then finding myself thinking, actually, no, why is it that I am doing this? And why is it that the young girls are also being called to do this? Everyone should be pitching in so that we can all watch the game together, right? And so those are things that I have to always kind of be mindful of and think about and to interrogate. And that journey of really kind of noticing, I think, is extremely important.
I love, okay, there's so many things. My head's like, what? The backlash to Beyonce putting feminist anywhere near herself was so huge and so fascinating to watch. And I remember when Ms. Magazine put her on the cover, and people lost their minds. And I was like, whoa, holy white fragility. Calm down, people. It's going to be okay. We're going to make it through Beyonce being a feminist. It's going to be all right. I remember that so clearly because I was just so thrilled. And I was like, whoa, yay. Because I love Beyonce. So
Me
I was
too.
like, yay. And then the white fragility was just like out of control. The other thing that I think is so interesting about what you're saying about those traditional roles and how we fall so easily into them, I love cooking and cleaning. Like I love cleaning a little obsessively. So it's sort of like, borderline OCD, but I'm okay. Like, that kind of thing. But I love cooking for my family, but my mom sent me this video of this woman that's going viral where they're in that she's like talking about how great everything's going, but she's holding up these signs that are saying they're making me cook and clean again, and I have to do all the housework and nobody is helping me. And so she's talking as if she's so thrilled that the family is back together and she's with her adult children and everything is lovely. But she's holding up these signs that say, but they're making me do all this traditional work. And it's so fascinating to hear the words coming out of her mouth while she's holding up these signs that are saying, help me, I'm struggling, I don't want to do this, they're making me do this. And it's really one of the most I laughed because I was like, I know how that feels, but it was like that painful laughter that's like, oh God, we're still doing this. And it's for so many people, there's so much conversation about how people aren't safe at home, right? And how are we even handling that as a society? And I think it's really, this whole thing is complicating. Everyone's like, we need a revolution. And I'm like, oh, this is the revolution. It just doesn't look the way you wanted it to.
And I love that you're saying that. It's like whole new meaning to Gloria Steinem's book, Revolution Within, right? Which is like now, reemerging in its new life, but also that, and we're kind of in this moment really forced to face what it means that many of us find more safety outside of our homes, or many of us are in grave danger without the support of our network. And thinking about the amazing work you do too, just the fact that there are many people who this kind of isolation is really, really, really harmful for, and that there are people right now who are not getting the support that they need, and they're not getting the connection that they need to be healthy. And I think a lot about that. I think a lot about how conversations like the ones that we're having right now are so important, and constantly being able to engage in forums like Facebook Live to let people know that we are here, we're in community still. This is a temporary experience that we're having. And again, we will embrace, again, we will celebrate in person and connect as humans.
And I think also embracing the ugliness
Mm-hmm.
and the chaos that is happening. And it is okay. It's going to be awful, but it is okay. Like it's that horrible ugliness but it's how no mud, no lotus. Like this is how things emerge and shift and change. And we've been asking, especially as I think an entirety of a feminist movement has been asking for change. We're just really not liking that we can't control exactly what the change is, right?
Oh, this uncertainty is, I mean, I was thinking, I went to you're talking about no mud, no lotus. I was thinking about a Dharma talk I went to with Pema Chodron last year, and it was so intense. And, every time I go, I'm like, oh, wait, I get really excited about these Dharma talks. And then after a Dharma talk, I'm like, wait, why did you put yourself through this, right? Like, why? And, and she always has people ask her that every year at these Dharma talks too, where they're like, come on, can you be easier on us this year, please? And she's like, nope, that's not how it is, right? You it comes together, it falls apart. It comes together, it falls apart. And I've really been thinking about that a lot right now, to kind of say that, yeah, this uncertainty drives a person like me completely batty, because I'm hypervigilant. I love to have a plan. I don't like surprises. And yet this life is one of impermanence. This life is one of constant transition. And like you said, yes, right now, all of it is uncertain. Nobody can speculate. Everyone can try. None of us know when we're going to have herd immunity, as they're talking about it. No one of us know. People can speculate, even the experts, right? And none of us really know when we're going to be on the other side of this. And so we have to be present. We have to be in the moment. We have to Ram Dass it and be here now.
The space to do her thing, because that's
exactly
what she's doing.
Absolutely.
Like, oh, I'm just kind of tired. I sent you Greta, you didn't listen. Hurricanes, you didn't listen. I sent you like catastrophic world, hunger. Y'all didn't listen. So now I'm just gonna make you go home. And I'm gonna kill a lot of people, but I'm gonna make you go home. I'm gonna get y'all sick, and you're not gonna be able to fly, and you're not gonna be able to go on cruises on my ocean, and you're not gonna be able to drive your damn cars. She's like, I'm just done with y'all. Everybody go home.
Did you see the Pope? So the Pope kind of talked about climate crisis today, which I found to be really fascinating and groundbreaking. Right.
I just think she was like, and I'm done with all y'all. Oh my God, I love talking to you. I could talk to you all day. One or more definable moments in your journey, or have you always just been this way? Like, is there a natural inclination for you to do the work you do? Or do you have moments that you can pick out?
Yeah, I think I have a mix of both. I think I've always had an inherent instinct of being outspoken in the face of injustice, from the playground to the boardroom to the media to the book, right? That it's always kind of been in my nature to be someone who, if I see something, I'm going to say something, or if I see an underdog, I'm going to root for them. And I think that part of that is because I very much still self-identify as such, right? And always from many different things. And I think another one would be, I was born partially blind and have very limited vision in one of my eyes. And I had a cataract surgery last year, but I'm still mostly blind in that eye and not eligible to get a lens in that for many different reasons. And I think that the perspective of this disability and what it has provided me in terms of what not being able to see as others see has allowed me to see through my heart, through my ears, through my instincts, through my connections with others, has taught me a great deal. And it's also taught me a great deal about empathy for other people whose shoes I may not walk in, but who may be dealing with different challenges than I am, just growing up in a world that wasn't shaped to scale for someone with my vision, and having to improvise, adapt, challenge dehumanization, advocate for myself, and to create my own despite being underestimated, or despite actively having things thrown in my way that could be accommodated, but others just don't understand why. That has really shaped me. And I think that that experience, it took me a long time to talk about it as something that I think shaped me, because I felt some measure of not wanting people to also see that as something that had been deleterious in my life. It's just something that is that identity of having a disability and having lived with it my whole life. And even I've said, even if I could fully have surgery that would restore complete sight, I don't know that that's something that I would want. And had people kind of debate me on this. And I believe it because I have come to see the world in a very specific way, given the experience that I've had. And I wouldn't trade it. Not to say that I haven't also had some very difficult obstacles that I endure every day as a result of this, or, things that I wish were different in my life. It's just something that I think has provided me with insight that I'm really grateful for. And that's why in my children's book, Young, Gifted, and Black, Stevie Wonder gets a very special tribute in it, because he talks about how eyes really aren't what contributes to having great vision in life. And I see him as a real hero in terms of my own growth and what I've come to learn about what it means to truly see in this world, to be a seer, which I self-identify as. Yeah. Although I don't see all that well compared to most people.
I love that. And I love that book, Young, Gifted, and Black. Oh,
thank you.
Right now, it's so delicious.
Thank you.
That's so wonderful. Oh, I love that. What are 3 specific and tangible habits or techniques that you use to counter negative self-talk?
Ooh, okay. So one thing I do to counter negative self-talk is to write down all of the things I'm grateful for. And many of those things are things I'm grateful for about myself. So, every day I'm a list maker. So I'll just say, I'm grateful that although I woke up this morning with tremendous anxiety about some losses that have happened this week due to COVID-19, I'm grateful that I was inspired to get up because I had this Zoom with us today, and that would be the kind of thing I would write. Or, I'm grateful for the opportunity, despite this pandemic and how it's really triggering to my anxiety, to build an even closer relationship with my partner. Those kinds of things. I also think that just does something to the brain to help get you into a trajectory of mindset shift. And it's not sort of like the toxicity of an over positivity focus that would undermine like all the myriad of beautiful, complicated feeling that we do, but to say that there are these silver linings that we can catch if we focus on them and allow them, that there's always a lesson, there's always a growth that we can embrace. And it doesn't mean that we're sweeping under the rug the truth. I think also movement practice. So I am really trying to move my body more. The negative self-talk I've noticed for me comes up a lot in terms of unspent energy. Yeah. That is not moved through my body. So I have a rebounder, which is on the other side of the room right now. And so I will jump on that and try to kind of get that energy out. And if I don't have access to my little rebounder, I do jumping jacks just to kind of like do a paradigm shift. That something about just having to focus on the jump works it out and moves it out. And then so much. And it's so fun, right? I mean, I love it. It's so funny because every time I'll kind of like put it on Instagram or something, that someone's always like, be careful with that, be careful with that. But I say, it's really about endorphin release. It's really about being able to just know that you're embodied, and these talks in your mind, sometimes they can feel all consuming. Sometimes they can feel like they are the truth, but there's so much in this that is the truth, right? Also, and the body is really important to tend to. And then for negative self-talk, a lot of the time too, it's just about embracing an external narrative of who you are versus the narrative that you really hold within yourself that is true. So I do like to do a practice of writing a letter to my younger self, and speaking to that self with a voice of gentleness. And if I can't have compassion for that self, then writing to a child that I actually know, and speaking to them in that tone about forgiveness and what they're entitled to and what they deserve. And that often helps get me out of that. And then also just getting on WhatsApp and text chains with beloveds, people who get you, people who love you, people who will be there for you no matter what. And just kind of being able to say to some of those folks, can you remind me
yes,
who I am in your life? Can you share with me a story about a time in which I showed up for you? And that's something I regularly need when I'm struggling. I was just saying to my husband, sometimes when I was going through grief, I would feel, and still going through it around the loss of my mom, just say, oh, can you remind me a story of a time in which you saw my love for her and her love for me? And that can kind of move me out of the tension of the moment of feeling mired in the sort of stagnant grief to kind of being like, oh, there's another story here that continues to live and breathe.
Oh, I love that so much. Those are some great ideas. I'm going to start doing jumping jacks.
Thank you.
I'm going to be all over the jumping jacks.
Oh, tell me how they go.
Anxiety shit out of me too. I'm like so done with it.
I mean, it's every morning. Like sometimes I just I'm like, I gotta move it all the way out.
Oh my God, I'm so excited about jumping jacks. I look so funny when I do them, so I'm really excited about that too. What is the most misunderstood myth of the word feminism?
Ooh, so I've actually been writing about this. So I'm working on a book for teens about feminism, and one of the things that I've been writing about is kind of the myth. And I think the most misunderstood and dangerous myth about feminism is that feminism is no longer relevant.
Oh.
Every time I, read one of those sort of pseudo obituaries to feminism online, or have, sometimes you hear people co-opt phrases like Kellyanne Conway saying, oh, there's no feminism anymore. We have post-feminism because we don't need that feminism anymore. That I find that to be very dangerous. And really kind of setting the record straight to let people know that feminism is about the equality of people of all genders, of all races, of all classes, abilities, and that it's really important for us to be mindful of the fact that saying that we have overcome the need for equality for all disregards the real truth of our systems. And I think right now, the current moment we're in really lays bare the reality of those myths. And I think that is one of the things that's emerging from this moment. And so that's the big myth for me, that this idea that somehow feminism no longer needs to exist, that it's irrelevant, that we have somehow arrived, or and it's something that opponents to equality, opponents to justice often will espouse. They'll often say, oh, well, you really don't need feminism anymore. Why don't you go to XY country and experience what's really happening there, right? I remember one time somebody sent me a meme telling me that I had no business talking about feminism, because if I really wanted to look at gender equality, I should go to Saudi Arabia. And it was really fun for me to say, oh, I grew up there. And while obviously Saudi Arabia definitely has a ways to go in terms of human rights and gender justice, the USA, which has no constitutional equality for women, also has its own work to do, because we lack an equal rights amendment and women are not covered under our constitution. Saudi Arabia has legislation against street harassment. We don't. And so I think it's important too for us to have those conversations, because there are a lot of people who erroneously believe that they are protected, that they are supported, that they have constitutional equality, and that that they are equal. And I think it's really hard to undo the damage that these myths have caused. And it's really important for us to continue to debunk them and to talk about what is true so that we can change the problems at hand. We have to address them first.
Yeah, I love that. I can't imagine anybody sending you a meme like that without having done their research first. It just kind of gets
Oh my gosh. I have so many stories for you about the things that people send.
Okay, 3 quickie questions. The first one is, what is the most important thing people need to know about writing and storytelling in 2020?
I'm thinking about a feminist press book that Beth Pickens wrote called Your Art Will Save Your Life. That title is what people need to know.
Love it. You talked a little bit about having a gratitude practice, but do you have a consistent and constant gratitude practice? And if you do, what is it?
Yes. So I, every day I pray. So I, pray before, when I wake up in the morning, I pray before bed, and I, I thank God and the Creator. And I also thank God for the people in my life who are the guides, who are the helpers, who are the supporters, who are the teachers, who are the courageous people who inspire me. And that's a big part of my practice. And then I also try to give gratitude like through the resources I can share. So sometimes if it's being able to donate like $5 to a friend's campaign who is running for something, or if it's recently being able to contribute to a GoFundMe for people at a bookstore that I really care about who have been laid off, trying to express gratitude in those ways, or, just even caring for people in my life who might need a little extra help right now by, sending them the supplies that they need during this time that I have access to. So I have a little care package of masks that I'm sending to several people who I know don't have them. And that's the kind of way that I like to practice reciprocity, kind of believing that my idea about life and my values are kind of like, you get what you give, and it's not transactional. It's just kind of the flow, right? This is the flow. This is the lesson. And really just wanting to continue to be in the cycle of reciprocity and being someone who can be a light for others. And I know that comes back to me in droves, and just keep that going. So that's a way that I like to give gratitude. And then also just, those acts of generosity and kindness and humanity, especially right now, are so important. Just to let people know that I see them, I hear them, I love them, I have empathy for them. I think we need more empathy. And when I think of the things that break my heart, and those experiences that break my heart, it's often feeling like there's too little of it, that there's so much bitterness, and just trying to be a balm when I can.
Yeah, I love that. If you would be willing to put that GoFundMe link or any other links that people might be interested in contributing to in the comments, that would be awesome.
I would love that. Thank you so much.
Yes. And last but not least, I talk a lot about your gut and your intuition and your little niggle, your niggle.
Yes.
Go. So what is your niggle or your instinct feeling telling you about what's next, either for your own work or for the world? But tell us what your niggle's telling you about what's next.
I feel, what's interesting for me is I'm kind of oddly embracing the uncertainty. Although it kind of terrifies me as somebody who likes the plan, is hypervigilant, likes to know what's happening. The instinct I have right now is to actually embrace the impermanence of this moment and trusting that the skills, community, connection, spirituality, practice that I have will guide what's next. And really having to hold that is what I have right now. And I was thinking, I'm in a group with some other women who set intentions together, and we kind of check in our intentions. And last year I was really big on like crossing these intentions out. You know, like I've said, I was going to do this, I was going to write this, I was going to do that, and this is all going to happen. I was going to get X dollar number of dollars on this, so I was going to do that. And that's good. And that's a metric, right? And then when we recently met, I thought, you know, I think if my French has improved by the end of this year, I'm going to feel growth, because I've finally taken time again to start practicing again in a real way, without having to have some sort of transactional metric attached to a goal. It's just something that I enjoy, something I've always loved, something that helps me connect with people. I love studying language. I love taking Italian. I love taking French. And so that came from having this acknowledgement of saying, well, now that all your travel speaking engagements, some of these other plans you had are on pause for the foreseeable indefinite future until we work this thing out, you need to live. You need to get back to that which gives you joy and connection. And what are those things? And so some of that is doing a lot more writing of my own, a lot more practicing of languages that I love, a lot more sitting at my altar and meditating, and a lot more just being present, a lot more sleeping, which I know sounds so simple.
No, I get it.
And practicing sleep hygiene and getting to bed at decent hours and waking and feeling refreshed in ways that I haven't in years. All of that. It's just being present, getting in touch with the being I am instead of the doing, I think is what's next for me. That's like keeping what I learned from this moment when we come out of this and we have the instinct to rush and overschedule and do all those things. But I hope to take back these things I'm relearning about just basic connection into life.
I love that so much. If people want to connect with you, how can they find you?
So happy to connect. Find me on my website, jamiawilson.org, on Twitter, Instagram. Love to connect with you. And if you want to submit books to Feminist Press for us to review your manuscripts, you can find us at feministpress.org. Follow us on social media, stay engaged with us. I know my colleague Lucia, who does our social media, is a rock star, and I love to follow our social media. So I would also just say,
your social media is so fun, the Feminist Press stuff. And for those of you who are looking for books to read during your quarantine, go to feministpress.org, because the books are epic.
Thank you so much.
Hang tight real quick, and I'll just hang tight. So thank you very much for joining me for this entire series. I'm going to be starting a new interview series mid-end of May about gratitude. So I hope you'll join me for that. And have a beautiful day, y'all. Don't forget, I have a free book on my website at naturalbornrebel.com. So download it. It's awesome. Thank you again.